Security pulled Black CEO off plane. Then she pulled 4.9B in funding from the airline. Get this woman out of here. First class is not for people like her. The words cracked across boarding gate A12 like a whip. Kennedy International Airport fell silent for a split second. Then the tension snapped. Two security officers flanked her, their hands hovering near her arms as if preparing to escort a criminal. Dr. Amara Bennett did not resist. She pressed her phone tighter against her ear, her face calm but carved with quiet fury. Around them, passengers whispered, some lifting their phones to record. Veronica Whitfield, the gate manager in a navy blazer, stood at the counter, arms crossed, lips curled into a smirk, watching as if humiliation itself was protocol. The boarding sign above glowed first-class priority boarding, but the atmosphere was anything but priority. It was a public trial. The early evening sun streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Business travelers in suits mingled with families heading to vacation destinations. Gate A12 buzzed with the typical pre-boarding energy of shuffling feet, rolling suitcases, and hushed conversations until Veronica's declaration silenced it all. Amara stood perfectly still, the simple gray cashmere sweater and black slacks she wore a deliberate choice. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just a woman with a first-class ticket being publicly questioned because she didn't fit someone's image of belonging. "Your ticket looks fake," Veronica said louder, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "We've seen this trick before. Print a pass at home and hope no one checks." Her tone dripped with disdain, as if Amara's very presence were a stain on the gate. The crowd shifted. A middle-aged man in a pressed suit chuckled, tossing in his voice like a stone. "She's holding us up. Put her with the others in coach." Amara did not flinch. She let the phone stay at her ear. Her free hand rested on the handle of her carry-on knuckles, steady, breathing even. "This is not your space." Veronica snapped again. Her voice cut through the gate louder than the final boarding call. And yet Amara did not break. She stood in the eye of the storm, silent, letting the chaos circle her. What the gate did not know was that silence was not weakness. It was preparation. And in less than half an hour, this silence would cost an airline $4.9 billion. Officer Miguel Rodriguez shifted his weight from one foot to the other, uncomfortable with the assignment but following orders. Beside him, Officer Trevor Walsh stepped closer, his presence more aggressive, his uniform worn like armor. "Ma'am, we need to see your documentation again," Rodriguez said, his tone professional but strained. Amara nodded once. "My boarding pass was already scanned and verified." It turned green. Her voice was measured, precise, the voice of someone used to being heard in boardrooms and laboratories. "Anyone can fake a green light these days," Walsh interjected, louder than necessary. "Technology's available to anyone with a laptop." From behind the counter, Veronica's smile widened. "Exactly. And it's always the same pattern. Find a flight print what looks like a premium ticket walk in bold and hope the system glitches in your favor." Passengers began to take notice. Some pretended not to watch while stealing glances. Others openly stared, already forming judgments. A woman pulled her daughter closer. A businessman adjusted his tie and shifted away, as if proximity might delay his own boarding. "I'm still here. Rachel." Amara spoke into the phone, her voice steady. "Yes, exactly like Houston last year. They're questioning my ticket again." A pause. "No, not yet. Let's see how far this goes." Veronica's eyes narrowed at the conversation. "Who are you talking to? Your accomplice, planning your next scam." Amara turned, slightly facing Veronica directly for the first time. "My chief of staff. We have a board meeting in New York tomorrow about medical technology acquisitions." "Right," Walsh snorted. "And I'm having lunch with the president tomorrow." A young woman in a trainee flight attendant uniform stood near the scanner. her face pale but her eyes focused. Elise Morgan had only been with Horizon Airlines for 3 weeks, but she knew what she had seen. The scanner had turned green when Dr. Bennett's pass was scanned. The ID matched. Everything was in order. The scan was valid, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What was that? Veronica turned sharply. I scanned her pass myself, Elise said louder now. The system verified it. Seat 1A, first class. The system confirmed it. Systems can be fooled, Veronica snapped. And you're new. You don't know what to look for yet. More passengers had started to gather. A man in a business suit glanced at his watch, irritated by the delay. A young couple whispered to each other, the woman nudging her partner when he stared too long. An elderly gentleman shook his head, whether in disgust at the situation or at Amara wasn't clear. My verification is complete, Amara said calmly. Your system confirmed my identity, my seat assignment, and my payment. If there's a technical issue with your verification process, perhaps we should call your IT department rather than creating a public spectacle. The issue isn't with our system, Veronica replied coldly. It's with people who think they can cheat their way into spaces they don't belong. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Officer Rodriguez looked at Amara's carry-on, a simple, well-made leather bag without obvious branding. Where are you traveling from Chicago? Amara replied. I was giving a keynote on medical technology innovation at Northwestern. Were you now? Walsh's tone made it clear he didn't believe her. From her phone, Rachel's voice came through just loud enough for those closest to hear. Dr. Bennett, should I contact General Counsel? This sounds like another clear case of Veronica cut in. This isn't about anything except following protocol. Security, please escort this person away from the gate. She's delaying our premium passengers. Veronica stepped from behind the counter, her heels striking the floor with deliberate force. She reached for Amara's boarding pass, which Elise still held uncertainly. Give me that, she snapped, snatching it from the young woman's hands. Without hesitation, she tore it in half, then in quarters, the sound of ripping paper echoing across the suddenly quiet gate. There, Veronica said, dropping the pieces into a nearby trash can. Problem solved. This document is fraudulent and you are not boarding this flight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Amara's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened, like steel being tempered. Officer Walsh stepped closer, his breath coming too close to Amara's face. People like you think one fancy outfit makes you equal, he muttered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. But some places aren't meant for your crowd. The words were a knife meant to slice quietly but deep. A teenage boy whispered to his mother, "He really said that." The mother's lips pressed tight, her hand gripping her son's shoulder as if to shield him from the ugliness he'd just heard. Brandon Keller, a 24-year-old graduate student returning from a conference, raised his phone higher. I'm recording this, he announced, his voice trembling slightly. This is being documented. Put that down, Veronica commanded. You're interfering with security protocol. What protocol involves tearing up a validated boarding pass? A voice challenged from the crowd. Thomas Alvarez, a 52-year-old business executive, stepped forward. I watched her scan in. The light was green. Sir, return to your seat unless you want to be removed as well, Officer Walsh threatened. Veronica gestured toward Amara's carry-on. Security, check her bag. People pulling these scams often carry fake credentials. Officer Rodriguez hesitated, but Walsh didn't. He yanked the bag from Amara's hand and unzipped it roughly. With a deliberate motion, he upended it, spilling its contents across the polished floor. A leather portfolio, a tablet, a passport, a small cosmetics bag, and a framed photograph clattered onto the hard surface. The photo frame cracked as it hit the floor, a spiderweb of lines spreading across the glass that protected an image of an elderly woman in a coral dress standing proudly in front of what appeared to be a university building. "Look at this," Veronica said, kicking the passport with the toe of her shoe. "Probably stolen or fake." Officer Walsh picked up the passport, flipping it open with contempt. "Amara Bennett," he read aloud, his tone suggesting the name itself was suspect. Amara finally moved. She bent slightly, reaching for the broken frame, but Walsh blocked her. "Don't touch anything until we've verified these items." Amara straightened, her calm never breaking. Into her phone, she said clearly, "Rachel, activate Protocol 8. The crisp voice on the other end responded without hesitation. "Understood. Initiating Protocol 8. Confirm escalation level." "Maximum," Amara replied. Veronica laughed. "Calling for backup. There's no one to save you from the consequences of your own fraud." "I don't need saving," Amara said, her voice even. "But this airline might." More phones had risen throughout the gate area. Jennifer Hayes, a 36-year-old marketing executive, narrated quietly into her recording. They just dumped out her bag and broke a personal photo after tearing up her boarding pass. The security officer made a comment about her crowd that was clearly racist. Greg Foster, a 44-year-old frequent flyer dressed in a tailored suit, stood up from his seat. "I've flown this airline over 200,000 miles this year, and I've never seen treatment like this. I saw her ID when she checked in. It matched her boarding pass." The atmosphere had shifted. What began as curious observation had transformed into active witnessing. People weren't just watching, they were seeing. "This is absurd," Veronica declared, her voice rising. "Security, remove her from this gate immediately. She's disrupting our boarding process and creating a scene. The only person creating a scene is you," Thomas Alvarez said firmly. "You tore up a valid boarding pass in front of dozens of witnesses." Amara closed her eyes for a single breath, letting the sounds of the gate fall away. This wasn't the first time, and the familiar weight of it pressed against her chest. Not panic, but a deep, controlled anger that she had learned to harness rather than release. At 17, walking across her college campus at night campus, security had stopped her. "Where's your ID?" "What are you doing here?" they demanded, despite her Yale sweatshirt and armful of textbooks. "This is a private university," they'd said, as if she couldn't possibly belong. At 25, arriving early to deliver a presentation at a luxury hotel, the staff had directed her to the service entrance. Deliveries go through the back, they'd insisted, ignoring her protestations until a white colleague arrived and vouched for her. At 34, walking into her first board meeting after acquiring a healthcare startup, the receptionist had handed her a coffee order form. "The executives will be here shortly," she'd said, assuming Amara was there to serve, not to lead. The memories flowed through her mind in an instant, a familiar catalog of indignities that she had transformed into fuel. Each incident had shaped her response, refined her strategy, and strengthened her resolve. 3 years ago, after being escorted off a different Horizon Airlines flight, despite having a first-class ticket, an incident that had ended with a half-hearted apology and a voucher she never used, Amara had gathered her team. "We need a system," she had told Rachel that night, sitting in her penthouse office overlooking Chicago. "Not just for me, but for every person who gets erased without consequences." Protocol 8 had been born that night, named after the 8th time she'd been publicly humiliated because of her skin color. It was more than a response plan. It was a framework for accountability woven into the very infrastructure of the companies she invested in. Amara opened her eyes, the memory fading back into the present moment. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "They will try to make you invisible. Your job is not to scream louder, but to become impossible to erase." Her grandmother had worn a coral dress to every significant moment in her life, to her college graduation, to civil rights marches, to court hearings, where she fought housing discrimination. The photo, now lying cracked on the floor, showed her in that same dress standing in front of Bennett Hall at Howard University, named after Amara's grandfather, who had been a pioneering physician. Amara felt the familiar surge of anger, but she channeled it inward, using it to fuel her resolve rather than break her composure. She had learned early that showing anger would only reinforce their narrative. Tears would only confirm their dismissal. Dignity was her most powerful weapon. She inhaled slowly through her nose, exhaled through slightly parted lips. The technique her father had taught her during her residency when the pressure became overwhelming. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. The rhythm steadied her, centered her. In her ear, Rachel confirmed Protocol 8 initiated. All systems engaging, timestamp logged, legal team notified, board alert sent. Proceed as planned. Yes, Amara replied softly. Full documentation, no exceptions. The coral dress in the photograph seemed to glow under the harsh airport lighting. Amara had deliberately chosen not to wear designer clothes today, not to arrive with an entourage or flash the trappings of wealth. She had dressed simply, carried a modest bag, approached the gate alone, a test she had conducted periodically since her first investment in the airline. A test that Horizon Airlines was failing spectacularly in front of dozens of witnesses and recording devices. Officer Walsh was still holding her passport, examining it with exaggerated suspicion. Officer Rodriguez had stepped back slightly, uncertainty beginning to show in his posture. Veronica stood with her arms crossed, victory in her stance, unaware that with every word, every action, she was sealing the fate of her career and shaking the foundation of the company she represented. Amara made her decision. She would not fight to board this flight. She would not create a scene. She would simply stand in the center of the one already unfolding and let Protocol 8 do exactly what it was designed to do, transform momentary powerlessness into lasting change. You're right about one thing, she said, finally, her voice clear enough to carry across the gate. This isn't about a boarding pass or a seat assignment. This is about something much bigger, and we all know exactly what that is. Elise Morgan, the young trainee flight attendant, felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She had watched Veronica tear up a valid boarding pass, a direct violation of company policy. She had seen Officers Walsh and Rodriguez dump out a passenger's personal belongings. She had heard the comment about your crowd, and she had remained silent for too long. I scanned her boarding pass. Elise said, her voice stronger now. It showed green confirmation. Her ID matched. She is a legitimate first-class passenger on this flight. Veronica's head snapped toward her. You are 3 weeks into training. You don't make these determinations. I don't need to make determinations, Elise countered, surprising herself with her steadiness. The system already did. Green means verified. That's what we were taught in training. Jennifer Hayes stepped closer, her phone still recording. I've been documenting everything she said. The valid boarding pass being torn up. The security officer's comment about her crowd. The destruction of personal property. This isn't about airline protocol. This is targeted harassment. Put that phone away, Officer Walsh demanded. Recording security procedures is against airport regulations. Discrimination isn't a security procedure, Jennifer replied. Greg Foster, the frequent flyer, stood his ground. I was right behind Dr. Bennett at check-in. I saw her ID. I saw her boarding pass. Everything was in order. I've flown over 200,000 miles with Horizon this year alone, and I've never seen a passenger treated this way. The gate area had become divided. Some passengers still sat uncomfortably, eyes averted, hoping the situation would resolve itself without their involvement. Others had formed a loose semicircle around the confrontation phones raised, witnessing actively. This woman is disrupting the boarding process, Veronica insisted. She presented suspicious documentation and became confrontational when questioned. That's simply not true, Thomas Alvarez countered. I've been watching from the beginning. She hasn't raised her voice once, She hasn't become confrontational at all. You, on the other hand, tore up her boarding pass without cause. A murmur of agreement spread through the growing crowd of witnesses. Sophia Lopez, a senior flight attendant, approached from the jet bridge, drawn by the commotion. "What's happening here? We need to begin boarding." Veronica turned to her with relief. "We have an individual attempting to board first class with fraudulent documentation. Security is handling it." Sophia glanced at Amara, taking in her calm demeanor, then at the items scattered on the floor, then at the numerous passengers recording the scene. Something didn't align with Veronica's explanation. "I see," Sophia said cautiously. She turned to Elise. "Did you scan her boarding pass?" Elise nodded. "Yes, it verified green. Seat 1A. Sophia's expression shifted slightly. "Then why are her belongings on the floor?" Security Check Officer Walsh said flatly. "Suspected fraud." Brandon Keller, still filming, moved closer. "He said people like her aren't meant for first class, that she should stay with her crowd. I have it recorded right here." A woman in a business suit who had been silently watching spoke suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't about airline protocol or suspected fraud. This is about her skin color. Let's stop pretending it's anything else." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth that many had felt, but none had stated so directly. Officer Rodriguez took a small step back. "I think we should verify her documentation again, through the main system." "It's been verified already," Elise insisted. "The system confirmed it." Amara hadn't moved. She stood surrounded by her scattered belongings, her broken family photo at her feet, her passport still in Officer Walsh's hands. Through it all, her dignity remained intact, her gaze steady. "Rachel," she said into her phone, "ensure the audio capture includes badge identification for all staff involved." "Already done," came the calm reply. "Facial recognition mapping complete. Timestamp verification ongoing." Veronica's confidence wavered for the first time. "Who exactly are you talking to? What are you recording?" Amara looked directly at her. "The better question is, who will be reviewing these recordings later?" Officer Rodriguez's radio crackled with static. He stepped away, listening to a message, his expression growing increasingly concerned. Veronica's voice rose, desperate to regain control of the situation that was rapidly slipping away. "This ends now. Officer Walsh, please escort this woman from the gate. She is not boarding this flight." But Walsh hesitated, glancing at his partner, who was still listening intently to his radio. "I said remove her," Veronica demanded. "You need to hold on," Rodriguez said, rejoining them. There's nothing to discuss." Veronica cut him off. "This woman is not a legitimate passenger." Sophia Lopez stepped forward. "Veronica, if her boarding pass scanned green, then she is a legitimate passenger. That's our verification process." "The process can be manipulated," Veronica insisted, "and I'm the final authority at this gate." A dangerous flash appeared in Amara's eyes. Not anger, but something more controlled, more focused. "Authority is temporary," she said quietly. "Truth is permanent." Brandon's live stream had begun to gain traction. Comments were pouring in, viewers multiplying by the second. "They're trying to remove a black woman from first class even though her ticket is valid," he narrated. The manager tore up her boarding pass and security dumped out her bag. Officer Walsh, growing increasingly uncomfortable with the number of recording devices, made a decision. He reached for Amara's arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us now." The moment his fingers closed around her wrist, a collective gasp rose from the witnesses. Thomas Alvarez stepped forward immediately. "Take your hands off her. She has not broken any laws." "Stand back," Sir Walsh warned. "No," Thomas replied firmly. "You're assaulting a passenger with valid documentation. That's not security, that's harassment." Amara remained still, her eyes locked on Walsh's hand gripping her wrist. "You are now physically detaining me without cause," she stated clearly. This constitutes unlawful restraint and will be noted accordingly. Walsh released her, but his posture remained aggressive. You're interfering with airport security procedures. Requesting to see valid identification and boarding documents is a security procedure, Greg Foster interjected. Tearing up a valid boarding pass and physically restraining a passenger is not. Veronica reached for her radio. I'm calling for airport police. This situation needs to be contained. Rodriguez shook his head slightly. Veronica, I just received a message from dispatch. We need to... I don't care what dispatch says, she snapped. This woman is creating a disturbance and needs to be removed. Amara bent down slowly, picking up the broken photo frame. She carefully removed the photograph of her grandmother, tucking it into her pocket, leaving the shattered glass on the floor. The simple dignity of the action silenced the gate momentarily. When she straightened, Amara's voice was quiet, but carried across the entire space. Every word spoken here, every action taken, is being documented not just by these passengers, but by systems you cannot see and cannot stop. This moment will live far beyond this gate. Officer Rodriguez's radio crackled again, louder this time. A voice came through clearly enough for those nearby to hear. All officers at Gate A12 stand down immediately. Verification protocol override in effect. Repeat, stand down immediately. Walsh's expression shifted from confidence to confusion. What the hell is going on? Veronica grabbed the radio from her belt. This is Gate Manager Whitfield. I need police assistance at Gate A12 immediately. Disruptive passenger situation. But instead of a confirmation, the reply came back. Gate A12, this is operations. Stand down. Investor protection protocol has been activated. The color drained from Veronica's face. Investor what? Amara's phone chimed softly. She listened for a moment, then nodded. Yes, Rachel. Proceed with full documentation and alert the board that I'll be joining their emergency call in approximately 20 minutes. And yes, initiate the first phase of withdrawal procedures. The atmosphere in the gate had transformed completely. What began as a confrontation between authority and a single passenger had evolved into something else entirely, something where the balance of power was shifting visibly with each passing second. Sophia Lopez, sensing the change, approached Amara directly. Ma'am, I apologize for this situation. If you'll allow me, I can assist you with boarding immediately. That won't be necessary, Amara replied calmly. I no longer intend to board this flight. The broken pieces of her boarding pass still lay in the trash can, visible to everyone. The symbolism was impossible to miss, a physical manifestation of how Veronica had attempted to erase Amara's rightful place. Thomas Alvarez, who had stepped forward to intervene when Walsh grabbed Amara, now addressed the gathering crowd. We all witnessed what happened here. A passenger with a valid first-class ticket was humiliated, had her property destroyed, and was physically detained, all because she didn't look like someone's idea of who belongs in first class. Murmurs of agreement spread through the gate. Veronica, desperate to salvage the situation, made one last attempt. This is still an airport security matter, and I am still the authority at this gate. Not anymore, came a voice from behind her. A subtle change rippled through the electronic systems at Gate A12. The boarding screens flickered momentarily. The check-in terminals flashed a brief error message before returning to normal, or what appeared to be normal to the casual observer. But Elise noticed something different on the gate computer. A small icon had appeared in the corner of the screen, a simple figure 8 enclosed in a red circle. Amara stood calmly amid her scattered belongings, still connected to Rachel on her phone. Confirm visual indicators, she said quietly. Confirmed. Rachel replied from her position at Bennett Global Headquarters in Chicago. All Horizon systems showing Protocol 8 activation. Badge scanners updated. Terminal access modified. Board notifications dispatched. Legal team deployment initiated. Media monitoring engaged. What the passengers and staff at Gate A12 couldn't see was the sophisticated crisis management system now unfurling throughout Horizon Airlines' digital infrastructure. 3 years earlier, when Amara had become the airline's largest private investor, she had negotiated certain protections as part of her investment agreement, including the integration of what her team called Protocol 8. The system was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its effectiveness. Upon activation, it began documenting every word spoken near active airline badges, time-stamping security camera footage, and sending real-time alerts to the Board of Directors' emergency channel. Simultaneously, it froze personnel changes, locked access credentials for those directly involved, and prepared an automatic record of the incident. The first visible sign appeared when Officer Walsh attempted to use his radio again and found it locked. What the he muttered, pressing buttons frantically. Veronica reached for her tablet to check the passenger manifest, but her screen displayed only one message: access suspended. Ethics review initiated. She tried her badge on the gate terminal. The scanner beeped once and flashed red. Authorization revoked, the small display read. "What is happening?" Veronica demanded, her voice rising with panic. Amara surveyed the scene calmly. "Accountability," she replied simply. Sofia Lopez's tablet chimed with an incoming message. She opened it, read quickly, and her eyes widened. She looked at Amara with new understanding and a hint of fear. "You're—" she began, but stopped herself. "Yes," Amara confirmed without elaboration. Brandon Keller, still live-streaming, moved closer. "Something's happening with their systems. The manager's badge isn't working." Jennifer Hayes narrated to her own recording. "The security officer's radios appear to be locked. The gate manager can't access the computer system anymore." More passengers had gathered, drawn by the growing tension and the unusual technological glitches. The regular boarding process had been completely derailed, yet strangely no supervisor had arrived to investigate the delay. Rachel Amara said into her phone, "Initiate Stage 2. Full executive notification." Executing now, came the calm reply. "William Blackwood has been notified. His response is incoming." As if on cue, the gate announcement system activated, but instead of the usual boarding information, a different message played. "Attention all Horizon Airlines staff at Kennedy International Airport. A Level 1 investor protection protocol has been activated at Gate A12. All supervisory personnel report to Emergency Channel 4 immediately. This is not a drill." The color drained from Veronica's face. "Investor protection." She whispered, the implications beginning to dawn on her. "What the hell does that mean?" Officer Walsh demanded, still trying to activate his frozen radio. Officer Rodriguez had gone very still, his eyes fixed on Amara with dawning recognition. "It means," he said slowly, "that we've made a terrible mistake." Throughout the terminal, other Horizon employees had frozen in place, listening to the announcement with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. At neighboring gates, staff members whispered urgently to each other, glancing toward A12 with growing concern. Amara began calmly collecting her belongings from the floor, placing them back in her bag with deliberate movements. The cracked frame she left where it had fallen, a visible reminder of what had been broken. "Protocol 8, she explained to the bewildered gate staff, is a specialized security system that activates when certain investors in Horizon Airlines experience discrimination or mistreatment. It creates an unalterable record of the incident and initiates an immediate review at the highest levels of the company." "Investors?" Veronica repeated, her voice barely audible. "Yes," Amara confirmed. "Every word you've spoken, every action you've taken in the past 15 minutes has been logged, time-stamped, and forwarded to the Board of Directors. Every security camera in this terminal is now preserving footage. Every badge scan is being recorded. Nothing can be erased or altered." The implications washed over the gate like a wave. Passengers exchanged glances of disbelief and growing understanding. The power dynamics had shifted completely. Brandon's live stream exploded with comments. Wait, is she saying she's an investor in the airline? They just discriminated against their own investor. This is about to get good. Sophia Lopez approached Amara cautiously. Dr. Bennett, on behalf of the flight crew, I want to express our deepest... Not now, Amara said calmly. That will come later in a more appropriate forum. On the main terminal screens, a notification appeared. Attention Horizon passengers at Gate A12. We apologize for the boarding delay. A priority situation is being addressed. Thank you for your patience. But patience was the last thing on display as the witnesses to this unfolding drama realized they were watching something unprecedented, a moment when the usual power structure had been completely inverted. 3 gates away, William Blackwood, CEO of Horizon Airlines, was preparing to board a flight to Chicago when his secure phone vibrated with an urgent alert. The message was brief but unmistakable in its severity. Protocol 8 activated. Gate A12. Principal investor, Bennett. The blood drained from his face. Protocol 8 was the emergency response system negotiated as part of Amara Bennett's $4.9 billion investment 3 years ago, a system he had personally assured her would never need to be used because Horizon would transform its culture. Cancel my boarding, he snapped to his assistant. Get me to Gate A12 immediately, and get the board on an emergency call. Now. As he strode through the terminal, his phone buzzed continuously with incoming alerts. The social media team was reporting a live stream from Gate A12 gaining thousands of viewers per minute. The legal department was already documenting potential liabilities. The stock monitoring system was detecting unusual after-hours trading patterns. At Gate A12, the situation continued to evolve rapidly. Amara stood at the center, composed and unwavering, while around her the witnesses had formed an impromptu community, strangers united by their shared observation of injustice. This is going viral, Brandon announced, glancing at his phone. Had Horizon discrimination is trending. People are sharing this stream everywhere. Jennifer Hayes nodded. Major news outlets are picking it up. I just got a message from a college friend who works at CNN asking if I'm at Kennedy Terminal 4. The digital ripples were spreading far beyond the physical confines of Gate A12. In financial centers around the world, even though markets were closed, traders were sending messages preparing positions for the morning. Investment analysts were issuing preliminary alerts about potential volatility in Horizon Airlines stock. Veronica Whitfield, her authority now completely undermined, made a desperate attempt to reassert control. Everyone needs to return to their seats immediately. This is still an active boarding gate. No one moved. The collective decision had been made this moment would be witnessed to its conclusion. You called me a fraud, Amara said, her voice clear and steady. You accused me of theft. You tore up my valid boarding pass. You authorized security to dump my personal belongings on the floor. You watched as an officer made explicitly racist comments about my crowd. And you did all of this in front of witnesses while being recorded without once verifying my identity through proper channels. Each statement landed like a hammer blow. Veronica flinched visibly. I was following security protocols, she stammered. No, Thomas Alvarez interjected. You were following your prejudice. We all saw it. Officer Walsh, still struggling with his deactivated equipment, stepped forward aggressively. This is absurd. She's bluffing about being an investor. This is just a distraction technique. As if in answer, all the gate displays simultaneously updated with a new message. Horizon Airlines Investor Protection Protocol active. All staff stand by for executive instructions. Officer Rodriguez had backed away entirely, his posture now protective of the passengers rather than confrontational toward Amara. Trevor stopped talking, he warned his partner. This is real. The sound of rapid footsteps approaching drew everyone's attention. A group of Horizon executives was hurrying toward the gate, their faces tense with concern. Leading them was William Blackwood, his normally composed expression replaced by barely concealed panic. He stopped at the edge of the gathered crowd, taking in the scene, Amara standing calmly amid her partially collected belongings, Veronica frozen behind the counter, the security officers in disarray, dozens of passengers recording every moment, the broken picture frame still on the floor. Dr. Bennett. He said, his voice strained with forced professionalism. I understand there's been an incident. Amara turned toward him slowly. That's one way to describe public humiliation and racial discrimination, William. The familiarity with which she addressed the CEO sent another ripple of realization through the crowd. This was not just any investor. I want to personally assure you that whatever has happened here does not reflect Horizon's values or policies. He began slipping into crisis management mode. Don't, Amara cut him off. We're well past corporate platitudes. Protocol 8 has been activated, which means the board is already receiving documentation of exactly what happened here. The only question remaining is what happens next. William's attempt at a reassuring smile faltered. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. No, Amara replied simply. Discrimination thrives in private spaces. Accountability requires witnesses. As if to emphasize her point, Brandon's phone chimed loudly. He glanced at it, then announced, The live stream just passed 100,000 concurrent viewers. William blanched. Dr. Bennett, I assure you that Horizon takes these matters extremely seriously. If you'll allow us to escort you to our premium lounge, we can. William. Amara interrupted, her tone unchanged, but somehow more powerful. 3 years ago, when I invested $4.9 billion in Horizon, you personally guaranteed that incidents like the one I had experienced would never happen again. You promised structural changes, comprehensive training, and zero tolerance for discrimination. Today demonstrates that those promises were empty. The number $4.9 billion hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted from passengers who hadn't yet grasped the full magnitude of who Amara was. She owns part of the airline, someone whispered loudly. They tried to throw out their own investor, another added. William's professional demeanor cracked further. Dr. Bennett. I cannot express how deeply Amara raised her hand, slightly stopping his words. Into her phone she said clearly, Rachel, prepare to execute the full withdrawal strategy, effective immediately. Amara Bennett stood tall amid the chaos she had not created but would now resolve. The scattered contents of her bag had been mostly collected, but the broken frame remained on the floor, a deliberate reminder of what had transpired. I am Dr. Amara Bennett, she said, her voice neither raised nor strained, but carrying effortlessly across the now silent gate. I am the founder and CEO of Bennett Global, a medical technology corporation that revolutionized cardiac monitoring systems. I hold 17 patents, serve on the boards of 4 major hospitals. And yes, I am the principal private investor in Horizon Airlines, with a $4.9 billion stake representing 37% ownership. The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples that spread throughout the gate. 3 years ago, I experienced similar discrimination on a Horizon flight. I was removed from first class despite having a valid ticket. At that time, I chose not to pursue legal action. Instead, I decided to transform the company from within by becoming its largest investor. William Blackwood stood frozen, aware that every word was being recorded, every reaction scrutinized. As part of my investment agreement, Amara continued. I required the implementation of Protocol 8, an accountability system designed to document discrimination when it occurs. Today has proven how necessary that system was. Veronica Whitfield had backed against the counter, her face ashen. I didn't know. That is precisely the point, Amara cut in. You didn't seek to know. You saw my skin and made assumptions. You saw my casual clothing and made judgments. You didn't check the investor list that is available to every gate manager. You didn't verify my identity through proper channels. You chose humiliation as your first response, not your last resort. Officer Walsh, finally grasping the severity of the situation, had gone quiet. His previous bravado evaporated. Brandon Keller, still live streaming, narrated quietly. The CEO of the airline is here now. Dr. Bennett just revealed she owns 37% of the entire company. She was their largest investor, and they tried to drag her off her own plane. Jennifer Hayes added to her own recording. This is unprecedented. The racial profiling incident we've been documenting turns out to involve the airline's principal investor. She's implemented some kind of accountability protocol that's locking out the staff involved. The terminal displays continue to update with new messages. Horizon Airlines executive alert, all supervisory staff report to emergency channel. Investor Protocol 8 active. This is not a drill. Throughout the airport, Horizon employees watched the alerts with growing concern. At other gates, boarding procedures slowed as staff whispered among themselves, trying to understand what was happening. Thomas Alvarez stepped forward. As someone who has experienced similar treatment while traveling, I want to thank you, Dr. Bennett. Not just for standing your ground today, but for creating systems that might prevent this from happening to others. Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. William attempted to regain control of the situation. Dr. Bennett, I want to personally assure you that the individuals involved will be dealt with immediately. This is not who we are as a company. But it is, Amara replied evenly. This is exactly who you are. Not in your mission statements or your diversity reports, but in moments like this when a black woman stands alone at your gate and your staff feel empowered to humiliate her without consequence. The truth of her words was impossible to deny. The evidence surrounded them, the torn boarding pass, the deactivated badges, the broken frame, the dozens of recordings capturing every moment. Elise Morgan, the trainee who had first spoken up, stepped forward tentatively. Dr. Bennett, I want you to know that in training we were taught to always verify identity through the system before taking any action. What happened today violated our own protocols. Thank you, Elise, Amara acknowledged. Your willingness to speak the truth when others wouldn't is noted. William's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it, and his expression fell further. The board chair is requesting an immediate briefing, he said quietly to Amara. They're viewing the Protocol 8 documentation now. Good, Amara replied. They should see exactly what their corporate culture has produced. On the main terminal screens, a news ticker had begun to display a breaking story. Major disruption at Kennedy Airport, as airline investor allegedly faces discrimination. The story was expanding beyond their control, beyond the confines of Gate A12, beyond even the reach of Horizon's crisis management team. What had begun as one woman being questioned about her boarding pass had transformed into a potential corporate catastrophe unfolding in real time. Brandon's live stream comments were scrolling faster than could be read, but certain messages stood out. This is justice happening live. I'm canceling my Horizon flight right now. Someone's getting fired today. Amara turned to address the gathered passengers directly. I want to thank you all for bearing witness today. Your recordings, your willingness to speak up, your refusal to look away, these actions matter. Discrimination thrives in silence and darkness. You have helped bring light. A spontaneous round of applause broke out among the witnesses. People who had been strangers an hour ago were now united in their role as participants in an unexpected moment of accountability. William stepped closer to Amara, lowering his voice. Dr. Bennett, please, there must be a way to address this situation that doesn't... What, William? She interrupted, her voice still calm but unyielding. That doesn't damage your brand, that doesn't impact your stock price, that doesn't expose the gap between your diversity statements and your actual culture. He had no answer. Amara checked her watch, a simple, elegant timepiece that had belonged to her father. Protocol 8 documentation is now complete, she announced. Every word, every action, every policy violation has been recorded and transmitted to the board, to legal, and to an independent ethics review committee. Now we move to the consequence phase. Veronica's terminal beeped loudly, drawing attention. The screen displayed a simple message, employee status, suspended pending review. She stared at it in disbelief. "They can't just—" "They can," Amara interrupted. "And they have. The evidence is unambiguous." Officer Walsh's radio suddenly reactivated, but instead of the usual dispatch channel, a different voice came through Officer Walsh. "This is Horizon Airlines Security Director Hayes. Your airport credentials have been temporarily suspended. Please report to the main security office immediately." Walsh's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. I was following protocol." No, Officer Rodriguez countered, finding his voice. "We weren't. We violated at least 6 procedures, Trevor. We searched her bag without cause, we attempted physical detention without justification, and you made explicitly biased comments on a recorded channel." The power dynamics had shifted completely. Those who had wielded authority so confidently just minutes ago now found themselves stripped of it, while the woman they had tried to remove stood calmly at the center, her influence expanding with each passing moment. William Blackwood's phone rang again. He answered, listened briefly, then extended it to Amara. "It's the board chair. She's requesting to speak with you directly." Amara nodded and took the phone. "Claire, yes. The documentation should be comprehensive. No, I don't believe this can be resolved with the usual approach, because we tried that 3 years ago and today proves it failed. Yes, I understand the potential impact. No, I've made my decision." She handed the phone back to William, whose expression had fallen into resignation. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Now Amara replied, "We move to the consequences phase." Rachel. Through her own phone, Rachel's voice came clearly. "Ready, Dr. Bennett. Execute the full withdrawal strategy, all $4.9 billion, effective immediately." A collective gasp swept through the gate area. Even those who hadn't fully grasped the situation until now understood the magnitude of what was happening. Dr. Bennett William pleaded all pretense of corporate composure gone. "Please reconsider. That kind of immediate divestment would be catastrophic for whom?" Amara asked calmly. "For the airline that allows its staff to humiliate passengers based on race. For the company that promised cultural transformation but delivered empty statements. For the executives who will now have to explain to shareholders why the principal investor has withdrawn all support." Her words left no room for negotiation. This wasn't a threat or a bargaining position. It was a decision already made, already in motion. Brandon, still live streaming, whispered into his phone. "She's pulling billions of dollars from the airline. Right now. Live." Jennifer added to her own recording. "The largest investor in Horizon Airlines is withdrawing all financial support in response to racial discrimination experienced at their own gate." Applause broke out again, louder this time, spreading beyond the immediate witnesses to travelers at neighboring gates who had been following the situation through terminal announcements and social media. Sophia Lopez approached Amara hesitantly. "Dr. Bennett, not all of us at Horizon share these biases. Many of us are trying to create change from within, just as you attempted to do." Amara nodded. "I believe you, Ms. Lopez. And those who are truly committed to transformation will have opportunities in whatever emerges from this moment. This isn't about punishing everyone, it's about creating consequences significant enough that real change becomes inevitable rather than optional." Throughout the terminal, the electronic displays updated with a new message. "Attention all Horizon staff, emergency protocols enacted. Stand by for organizational announcements." The atmosphere had transformed completely. What began as one woman being questioned had evolved into a corporate earthquake, with tremors extending far beyond Gate A12. Officer Rodriguez approached Amara, his posture respectful rather than confrontational. "Dr. Bennett, I want to apologize personally for my role in this situation. I should have intervened earlier when Officer Walsh made inappropriate comments." "Yes," Amara agreed simply. "You should have. But acknowledgement is the first step toward change." William's phone buzzed continuously with messages from executives, board members, and the crisis management team, all trying desperately to contain a situation that had already escaped their control. On the financial news ticker visible on terminal screens, a new headline appeared. Horizon Airlines faces major investor withdrawal, stock futures plummet. The witnesses had become more than observers. They were now participants in a historic moment of corporate accountability unfolding in real time. Elise, who had spoken up at crucial moments, found herself at the center of attention as other Horizon employees approached her for details. Rather than shrinking from the spotlight, she stood taller, recounting exactly what she had observed. "I scanned her boarding pass myself," she repeated firmly. "The system verified her identity and seat assignment. Everything was in order. What followed was not protocol, it was prejudice." The simple truth of her statement resonated throughout the gate. Amara surveyed the scene with calm determination. She had not come to the airport seeking this confrontation, but neither would she allow it to be minimized or dismissed. The systems she had put in place years earlier had worked exactly as designed, creating an irrefutable record of discrimination that could not be denied, explained away, or buried in corporate bureaucracy. William Blackwood stood at the center of a crisis that was expanding by the second. As CEO of Horizon Airlines, he had navigated turbulence before economic downturns, fuel price spikes, labor disputes, but nothing like this. Never had the company's largest investor announced a complete withdrawal in the middle of a terminal surrounded by recording devices and witnesses. "Dr. Bennett," he began, attempting to recover some semblance of corporate poise. "While I understand your frustration, a decision of this magnitude requires proper procedure. Our shareholders—" "I am your largest shareholder," Amara interrupted. "And the procedures were established in our original investment agreement. Section 27. 4 specifically outlines my right to immediate withdrawal in the event of documented discrimination. Protocol 8 has provided that documentation." William blanched. She was right, of course. He had signed that agreement himself, never imagining it would actually be invoked. "The board needs time to—" "The board has had 3 years, Amara said firmly. 3 years since I first experienced discrimination on your airline. 3 years of promises about training, accountability, and cultural change. Today proves those promises were empty." Around them, the crowd had grown. What began as a gate confrontation had attracted attention throughout the terminal. Travelers from other gates had wandered over, drawn by the unusual announcements and the palpable tension. Brandon's live stream had exploded with over 250,000 concurrent viewers now watching events unfold in real time. Major news networks had picked up the story, and journalists were already racing toward Kennedy Airport. "You're destroying decades of brand building over one unfortunate incident," William argued, desperation edging into his tone. Amara's expression didn't change, but her voice took on a new edge of intensity. "One incident," she repeated. "Let me be clear, William. When I invested in Horizon, I established an anonymous reporting system for passengers experiencing discrimination. In 3 years, that system has collected 246 incidents, documented verified incidents of bias affecting passengers of color, passengers with disabilities, and passengers of various religious backgrounds." Gasps spread through the crowd. "I presented those findings to your board twice annually. Each time I was assured that changes were forthcoming. Each time the data was acknowledged but never acted upon. Today is not an isolated incident. It's the predictable result of institutional indifference." William had no response. The data she referenced existed. He had seen the reports himself, had signed off on plans to address them, plans that had been repeatedly delayed or diluted. Thomas Alvarez stepped forward again. "As someone who flies weekly for business, I've witnessed this pattern myself. It's subtle, sometimes blatant others, but it's consistent." Jennifer Hayes nodded. "I've changed airlines 3 times in 5 years because of similar experiences. The problem isn't unique to Horizon, but that doesn't make it acceptable." Amara turned back to William. When I became your principal investor, I didn't do it merely for financial return. I did it because I believed transformation was possible from within. I believed your commitments to change were sincere. She gestured toward the broken frame still lying on the floor. That photograph is my grandmother wearing the coral dress she wore to every significant moment in her life, including the day she was arrested for sitting at a whites-only lunch counter in 1963. She taught me that power isn't about making noise, it's about making change. The terminal had fallen, completely silent, passengers and staff alike captivated by the unfolding drama. I invested $4.9 billion in that lesson, Amara continued. I believed I could create change from the inside by becoming too significant to ignore. Today proves I was wrong. Horizon doesn't need another training program or diversity initiative. It needs to experience consequences significant enough that transformation becomes necessary rather than optional. William made one last desperate attempt. The financial impact of an immediate withdrawal would affect thousands of employees who had nothing to do with this incident. People could lose jobs. Pensions could be impacted. I'm well aware of the potential consequences, Amara replied calmly. Which is why my team has already prepared a transition plan that protects frontline employees while creating accountability at the leadership and policy level. She turned slightly, addressing the gathered witnesses directly. Discrimination thrives when the cost of maintaining it becomes lower than the cost of changing it. Today, that equation changes for Horizon Airlines. The simple truth of her statement resonated throughout the gate. This wasn't revenge. It was mathematics, the cold calculation of making prejudice too expensive to maintain. William's phone rang again. He answered, listened briefly, then lowered it slowly, his expression defeated. The board has convened an emergency session, he said quietly. They've requested your terms for potentially maintaining your investment. A murmur spread through the crowd. Was this negotiation now? Amara shook her head. There are no terms, William. The decision is made. Rachel. Through her phone, Rachel's voice came clearly. First phase of withdrawal complete. Dr. Bennett. Legal has filed all necessary documentation. Financial team confirms the process is irreversible at this point. William's shoulders sagged visibly. The corporate crisis he had hoped to contain had already progressed beyond the point of recovery. On the terminal screens, a breaking news alert appeared. Horizon Airlines stock halted after hours amid reports of major investor withdrawal. The financial markets, even after official closing, were already reacting to news that had spread from Gate A12 to trading desks worldwide. What happens to Horizon now? Someone in the crowd asked. Amara turned toward the voice. That depends entirely on whether this moment becomes a catalyst for genuine transformation or just another corporate crisis to be managed and minimized. The choice belongs to the board, the remaining shareholders, and ultimately to passengers who can choose where to spend their travel dollars. Her words carried no malice, no vindictiveness, just the clear-eyed assessment of someone who understood both corporate reality and human nature. Brandon, still live-streaming, captured the moment perfectly. We're witnessing more than an investor withdrawal. We're seeing what happens when power is used not for revenge, but for reset. Rachel Amara said clearly into her phone, complete the withdrawal. $4.9 billion will not remain with a company that humiliates its own. The simple declaration, spoken without drama or emphasis, nevertheless fell like a thunderclap across Gate A12. This wasn't a negotiating tactic or a threat. It was a decision already executed, a consequence already in motion. William Blackwood's phone immediately erupted with notifications. The board chat was exploding. The financial team was sending urgent alerts. The crisis management system was overwhelmed with media inquiries. Dr. Bennett, he pleaded, all pretense of corporate composure abandoned. Please, reconsider. The implications are exactly the point Amara finished for him. For too long, companies have treated discrimination as a PR problem rather than a moral failure. The implications are meant to be severe. On the nearest terminal screen, a financial news alert flashed. Trading halted Horizon Airlines, HSNA, amid reports of major investor exit. The witnesses gathered at the gate watched in real time as the consequences of discrimination transformed from an abstract concept into financial reality. Veronica Whitfield, Amara, said, turning to the gate manager who stood frozen behind the counter. Your actions today were not a mistake or a misunderstanding. They were the calculated humiliation of someone you decided didn't belong. Your employment with Horizon Airlines is terminated effective immediately. Veronica's face crumpled. You can't. I just did. Amara replied simply. Protocol 8 includes provisions for immediate termination in cases of documented discrimination. Your badge has already been deactivated. She turned next to Officer Walsh. Trevor Walsh, your comments about my crowd and your physical aggression were recorded by multiple sources. Your security credentials have been revoked. You are no longer authorized to represent Horizon Airlines in any capacity. Walsh's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, his radio crackled again. Officer Walsh, report to the main security office immediately for credential surrender. The consequences were unfolding with startling speed and precision, each step clearly predetermined, each response already programmed into Protocol 8's execution sequence. Officer Rodriguez, who had shown signs of doubt throughout the confrontation, received a different message. Officer Rodriguez, report for immediate retraining and incident review. William's phone rang yet again. This time, when he answered, the color drained completely from his face. He listened for nearly a minute without speaking, then responded with a single "understood" before hanging up. The board has called for my immediate return to headquarters, he said, his voice hollow. They've invoked the emergency succession clause in my contract. In plain language, the CEO was being removed. The ripples were expanding beyond the immediate scene at Gate A12, beyond even the confines of Kennedy Airport. Across the country, at Horizon's corporate headquarters in Atlanta, executives were being called into emergency meetings. At airports worldwide, Horizon staff were receiving unprecedented alerts. On financial news networks, analysts were already speculating about the long-term implications for the airline industry as a whole. Brandon Keller, whose live stream had now reached over 500,000 concurrent viewers, narrated quietly. The consequences are happening in real time. The gate manager fired, the security officer's credentials revoked, and now it sounds like the CEO himself is being removed. Jennifer Hayes added to her own recording, "This is unprecedented corporate accountability unfolding before our eyes. A company being forced to reckon with discrimination in its ranks through immediate tangible consequences." Amara stood calmly amid the chaos she had not created, but had certainly catalyzed. Her expression remained composed, but there was no triumph in it, only the quiet determination of someone seeing a necessary process through to completion. Thomas Alvarez approached her. Dr. Bennett, I've witnessed similar incidents throughout my career, but never seen consequences like this. You've created something extraordinary here. Not extraordinary, Amara corrected gently. Necessary. Discrimination persists because consequences rarely match the offense. Today they do. Elise Morgan, the trainee who had first spoken up about the valid boarding pass, approached hesitantly. Will everyone at Horizon lose their jobs because of this? Amara shook her head. No. Protocol 8 includes provisions to protect frontline employees who weren't involved in discrimination. The consequences are targeted precisely at those responsible and those who failed to prevent it. As if to confirm her words, Sophia Lopez's tablet chimed with a new notification. She read it quickly, her eyes widening. All flight attendants and gate staff are being instructed to participate in mandatory revised training beginning tomorrow, she announced. The message says it's part of a fundamental restructuring of company culture and procedures. The terminal screens updated again with a message directed at passengers. Attention Horizon Airlines customers. We are experiencing organizational changes. All flights will operate as scheduled. We appreciate your patience. The corporate machinery was already shifting into damage control mode, but the damage was beyond controlling. What happened at Gate A12 had transcended the boundaries of a single incident to become something larger, a moment of reckoning that would reverberate throughout the industry. On her phone, Rachel provided a final update. Withdrawal complete, Dr. Bennett. All funds transferred to the contingency account. The Bennett Foundation transition team is standing by for your instructions regarding industry reinvestment. Amara nodded. Activate Phase 3. The Scholarship Fund, the Passenger Advocacy Group, and the Accountability Initiative. Right away, Rachel confirmed. William, preparing to depart for headquarters, made one final appeal. Dr. Bennett is there anyway to... No, Amara said simply. Some bridges cannot be unburned, William. Some lessons must be learned through loss. The gathered witnesses, who had come to the airport as individual travelers with separate destinations, had become something else entirely. Participants in a historic moment of accountability. Observers to the rare sight of consequences, matching offenses in real time. As Amara collected the last of her belongings, a spontaneous round of applause began. It started with Thomas Alvarez, spread to Jennifer Hayes and Brandon Keller, then expanded throughout the gate area until dozens of people were applauding not in celebration, but in recognition of something true and necessary happening before their eyes. The broken frame remained on the floor, a deliberate reminder of what had been shattered here today. Not just glass, but the illusion that discrimination could continue without significant consequences. Amara Bennett knelt slowly and gathered the remaining pieces of her belongings. The shattered glass from the picture frame glinted under the terminal lights, each fragment reflecting a different angle of the scene unfolding around her. She left the broken frame where it lay, a deliberate choice, a physical reminder of what had transpired. The photograph of her grandmother in the coral dress was safely tucked in her pocket, pressed close to her heart. Some things could be broken, but still preserved. Others needed to be left behind as evidence. William Blackwood, now officially summoned to an emergency board meeting, stood awkwardly at the edge of the gathered crowd. His authority, once unquestioned, had evaporated in a matter of minutes. Dr. Bennett, he said, his voice strained with forced formality on behalf of Horizon Airlines. I want to extend our deepest. Save the prepared statement. William Amara interrupted, rising to her feet. This moment calls for truth, not public relations. The crowd had grown even larger. Passengers from neighboring gates had joined the witnesses drawn by the unusual terminal announcements and the buzz of social media. Airline staff hovered at the periphery, uncertain of their role in this unprecedented situation. Brandon's live stream counter showed over 700,000 concurrent viewers. Major news networks had dispatched teams to Kennedy Airport, though they hadn't yet arrived at Gate A12. The story was expanding beyond containment, beyond management, beyond control. William cleared his throat. The board has authorized me to issue a public apology and to assure you that the individuals involved will face. They already have, Amara said calmly. Veronica Whitfield has been terminated. Officer Walsh has been removed from service, and you have been called to account by your board. The consequences are not forthcoming. They are already here. Her words silenced him completely. This was not following the crisis management playbook he had relied on throughout his career. Elise Morgan, the trainee who had spoken the truth when others wouldn't step forward. Dr. Bennett. She said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. I want to apologize for not intervening sooner. I knew your boarding pass was valid. I should have been more forceful. Amara turned to her, her expression softening slightly. You spoke up when it mattered, Elise. That takes more courage than many people ever find. From the crowd, Officer Rodriguez approached cautiously. Unlike his partner, his posture conveyed genuine regret rather than defensive anger. "I failed today," he said simply. "I followed along when I should have questioned. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. There's no excuse for that, and I want you to know that I understand the consequences are deserved." Amara nodded once, acknowledging his words without diminishing their significance. "Recognition is the first step toward change, Officer Rodriguez. What matters now is what you do with that recognition." The atmosphere at Gate A12 had transformed completely. What began as a confrontation had evolved into something more complex, a moment of reckoning, yes, but also a possible beginning of something new. Thomas Alvarez, who had been one of the first passengers to speak up, addressed the gathered crowd. "I've traveled over 2 million miles in my career. I've witnessed this kind of discrimination countless times, sometimes directed at me, sometimes at others. But I've never seen real accountability until today." Jennifer Hayes nodded in agreement. "Usually these incidents end with an insincere apology and a voucher. Nothing changes because nothing has to change. Today is different." William, still hoping to salvage something from the situation, made one final attempt. "Dr. Bennett, if you would consider joining our board's diversity committee, perhaps your insights could—" "No," Amara said firmly. "Horizon doesn't need another committee or initiative. It needed consequences significant enough to force real change. Now, it has them." She turned to address the gathered witnesses directly, her voice clear and measured. "What happened here today isn't about me. It's about a system that empowers some people to erase others without expecting consequences. It's about the difference between diversity statements and actual culture. Most importantly, it's about what happens when silence is no longer an option." The simple eloquence of her words resonated throughout the gate. This wasn't a rehearsed speech or calculated performance. It was the distilled wisdom of someone who had navigated these waters her entire life. Brandon, still live streaming, captured the moment perfectly. Dr. Bennett isn't just withdrawing money from an airline. She's withdrawing permission for discrimination to continue without meaningful consequences. Sophia Lopez approached, holding her tablet. "Dr. Bennett, we just received notification of a company-wide reorganization effective immediately. A new interim CEO has been appointed, and an independent ethics committee is being formed to oversee cultural transformation." "That's a start," Amara acknowledged. "Though real change will depend on actions, not announcements." The terminal screens updated with a new message. "Attention Horizon passengers. We apologize for today's events at Gate A12. Horizon Airlines is committed to immediate and substantial changes to ensure all passengers are treated with dignity and respect." William read the message with visible resignation. The corporate machinery was already moving forward without him adapting to survive the earthquake that had just shaken its foundation. "What happens to Horizon now?" someone in the crowd asked. Amara turned toward the voice. "That depends on whether this moment becomes a catalyst for genuine transformation or just another corporate crisis to be managed and forgotten. The choice belongs to leadership, employees, and ultimately to passengers who vote with their wallets." As she prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. The applause that had begun earlier swelled again, but this time it was joined by something else. People stepping forward one by one to share brief words of gratitude or their own experiences with discrimination while traveling. An elderly man with a cane. "They tried to make me check my medical device last year. No one listened. A woman in a hijab. I get randomly selected for additional screening every single time I fly. A father with a child. My daughter uses a wheelchair. We're treated like inconveniences, not passengers." Each story was different, yet connected by a common thread: the experience of being erased, questioned, or diminished simply for existing in spaces where others felt they didn't belong. Amara listened to each person acknowledging their experiences with quiet nods. This too was part of justice, the validation that comes from finally being heard. As the last person finished speaking, Amara addressed the gathering one final time. Today you witnessed what happens when discrimination meets accountability. Remember this moment. Share your recordings. Tell this story. Because change doesn't come from those with power suddenly becoming enlightened, it comes from making the cost of maintaining the status quo higher than the cost of transformation. With those words, she picked up her bag, nodded once more to the assembled witnesses, and walked calmly toward the terminal exit, leaving behind a broken frame, a transformed airline, and hundreds of people forever changed by what they had witnessed. Justice had not arrived as a thunderbolt or revolution. It had arrived as a woman who refused to be erased, supported by systems she had carefully put in place years earlier, witnessed by strangers who chose to see rather than look away. It wasn't perfect justice. No single moment could erase decades of embedded bias. But it was real, consequential, and witnessed by too many to be denied or forgotten. The ripples from Gate A12 spread with astonishing speed, transforming from localized incident to national news in less than an hour. Brandon Keller's live stream had been picked up by major networks, which now displayed clips with headlines like "Airline Investor Withdraws $4.9 billion after facing discrimination and historic moment of corporate accountability at Kennedy Airport." As Amara walked through the terminal toward the exit, travelers recognized her from the viral videos already circulating. Some nodded respectfully. Others whispered to companions. A few approached to express support before respectfully moving on. Outside the airport, a hastily assembled press contingent waited, alerted by the explosion of social media coverage. Cameras tracked Amara as she moved calmly toward her waiting car, her expression unchanged from the composed determination she had maintained throughout the confrontation. "Dr. Bennett, will you be pressing charges against Horizon Airlines? Dr. Bennett, what message do you have for other corporations regarding discrimination? Dr. Bennett, where will your $4.9 billion investment go now?" She paused briefly before entering her car. "Today isn't about statements or interviews," she said clearly. "It's about actions and consequences. When companies understand that discrimination carries real costs, behavior changes. That's all I have to say for now." With that, she stepped into the car and departed, leaving the journalists with the perfect soundbite and an appetite for more. Back inside the terminal, the aftermath continued to unfold. Horizon staff hurried through emergency protocols, trying to maintain normal operations while adjusting to the seismic corporate shift occurring in real time. Gate A12 had become something of a pilgrimage site. Travelers stopped to look at the spot where it all happened, some taking photos of the broken picture frame that remained on the floor, an artifact that cleaning staff had been specifically instructed not to remove until further notice. Veronica Whitfield, escorted by airport security, exited through a side door, her badge confiscated. Her 15-year career ended in the space of 20 minutes. Her expression was a complex mixture of anger, disbelief, and the dawning recognition of consequences that couldn't be negotiated away. Officer Walsh surrendered his credentials at the security office, his protests falling on deaf ears. The recording of his "your crowd" comment had already been transcribed and added to his permanent file, a stain that would follow him to any future employment applications. At financial centers worldwide, analysts scrambled to assess the impact of Amara Bennett's withdrawal. Horizon Airlines stock, when it resumed trading, would likely open significantly lower. Investment firms began preparing client advisories about potential volatility in the entire airline sector. "This is unprecedented in modern corporate history," a CNBC analyst reported. "We've seen investor activism before, but never a principal investor withdrawing billions in response to direct personal discrimination. The ripple effects could transform corporate accountability practices across industries." On social media, #Protocol8 had begun trending alongside #Horizon Discrimination and #Amara Bennett. Users shared their own experiences with discrimination while traveling, creating a massive digital archive of incidents that would have previously remained isolated and unconnected. At Horizon's headquarters in Atlanta, the emergency board meeting had turned chaotic. William Blackwood attended via secure video link from Kennedy Airport, his usual confident demeanor replaced by defensive explanations and desperate suggestions for damage control. "The stock will stabilize once we announce a comprehensive response plan," he insisted. "We need to focus on containing this before markets open tomorrow." Claire Donovan, the board chair, cut him off sharply. "William, you still don't understand what's happening. This isn't a PR crisis to be managed. It's a fundamental failure of leadership and culture. The board has voted unanimously to accept your resignation effective immediately." The decision was swift and merciless, not out of moral outrage, but financial self-preservation. In corporate boardrooms, ethics often followed economics rather than leading them. Jennifer Hayes, whose recordings had contributed to the documentation of the incident, found herself suddenly in demand for interviews. "I just recorded what I witnessed," she told a reporter who caught up with her at baggage claim. "The real story isn't about bystanders like me. It's about a system that allows discrimination to happen without consequences until someone powerful enough comes along to change the equation." Thomas Alvarez received a phone call from the newly appointed interim CEO of Horizon, asking him to consider joining an emergency passenger advisory committee. "We need voices like yours to help us understand where we've failed and how we can improve," the executive explained. Thomas agreed to consider it, recognizing the opportunity to create change from within. Brandon Keller's live stream had made him an overnight sensation. His follower count jumped from a few hundred to over 1 million in the space of hours. Media outlets offered exclusive interviews, and social justice organizations reached out about potential collaborations. "I just happened to be there and decided to document what I saw," he told a friend via text. The real hero is Dr. Bennett, who created an accountability system years ago, knowing this day might come. Elise Morgan, the trainee who had spoken up at crucial moments, received an unexpected message on her company tablet. "Please report to headquarters tomorrow for special assignment with the new cultural transformation team." Rather than being punished for challenging authority, she was being recognized for embodying the values the airline claimed to uphold. Meanwhile, Amara Bennett returned to her hotel suite in Manhattan, where Rachel Goldberg waited with her team. The spacious room had been transformed into an impromptu command center with multiple screens displaying news coverage, social media analytics, financial data, and legal briefings. Protocol 8 performed exactly as designed, Rachel reported. Every word, every action, every violation was documented and transmitted in real time. "The legal team confirms we have ironclad evidence of discrimination that would hold up in any court. Though I don't think it will come to that. Horizon's legal department is already drafting settlement terms that acknowledge fault rather than contest it." Amara nodded finally, allowing herself a moment to process the emotions of the day. "And the funds?" "All $4.9 billion has been transferred to the contingency account," Rachel confirmed. "The Bennett Foundation team is prepared to implement Phase 3 according to the plan we developed 3 years ago. Phase 3, the part of Protocol 8 that went beyond consequences to create lasting change. It included establishing a passenger advocacy organization, funding scholarships for minorities in aviation management, and creating an industry-wide accountability rating system for airlines." "Good," Amara said simply. What happened today wasn't just about one airline or one incident. It was about changing the calculations that allow discrimination to continue because it's cheaper than changing. As night fell over New York City, the story continued to expand. International news outlets picked it up, connecting it to global conversations about corporate accountability and racial justice. Financial analysts published emergency briefings about potential market impacts. Social media users shared and reshared recordings from Gate A12, ensuring the moment would not be forgotten or minimized. What had begun as one woman being questioned about her boarding pass had transformed into something much larger, a case study in how power, when properly leveraged, could create consequences significant enough to force real change. The sun rose over New York City the next morning on a transformed landscape, not physically, but in the invisible architecture of power, accountability, and consequences that shapes corporate behavior. Horizon Airlines stock opened 31% lower, triggering circuit breakers designed to prevent market panic. Financial analysts described it as a Bennett effect, with ripples extending throughout the airline industry as investors reassessed risk factors related to corporate culture and discrimination policies. Other airlines scrambled to demonstrate their commitment to inclusive practices, announcing reviews of their training protocols, publishing diversity metrics, and highlighting passenger rights initiatives. The sudden corporate awakening wasn't motivated by moral enlightenment, but by the very real financial consequences that Horizon now faced. At Kennedy Airport, Gate A12 had been temporarily closed not for repairs, but because it had become something of a memorial. The broken picture frame had been carefully preserved behind a small velvet rope with a simple placard, "Site of the Bennett Accountability Moment," a reminder that dignity is non-negotiable. Passengers stopped to take photos, some leaving notes or small tokens. What might have been dismissed as performative theater by cynics had instead become a genuine site of reflection, a physical reminder that abstract concepts like discrimination and accountability sometimes manifest in specific places at specific moments. Elise Morgan arrived at Horizon headquarters in Atlanta, where she joined a hastily assembled cultural transformation team. Rather than the corporate diversity consultant she expected to meet, she found herself face-to-face with Dr. Regina Howard, a renowned expert in organizational psychology and ethical leadership. "Horizon has hired our firm to conduct a comprehensive audit of the company's culture," Dr. Howard explained to the assembled team. "We're not here for quick fixes or PR statements. We're here to identify and transform the underlying patterns that allowed yesterday's incident to occur." Elise nodded, surprised by the apparent sincerity of the approach. "Will anything really change, though?" she asked cautiously. Once the media attention dies down, Dr. Howard smiled slightly. "That's a fair question. But you're missing an important detail. Our firm was hired directly by the Bennett Foundation as part of Phase 3, not by Horizon. Our findings and recommendations will be made public regardless of whether the company implements them. That's accountability with teeth." Across town, Thomas Alvarez attended his first meeting of the newly formed Passenger Advocacy Committee. He expected corporate platitudes and damage control. Instead, he found himself reviewing actual boarding incident data, documented patterns of discriminatory treatment, and draft policies with real enforcement mechanisms. "These don't read like typical corporate policies," he observed, flipping through the materials. The interim CEO, Janet Reeves, nodded. "They're not. They were designed by the Bennett Foundation team as part of the Protocol 8 framework. We're implementing them not as a choice, but as a condition of maintaining our operating partnerships with other airlines and financial institutions." Meanwhile, Brandon Keller found himself invited to speak at a conference on digital accountability and citizen journalism. "I was just a guy with a phone," he explained to the audience. "But that phone became a tool for witness when I chose to use it that way." What happened at Gate A12 would have been a very different story without dozens of people documenting it in real time. Jennifer Hayes received an unexpected email from a major airline industry publication requesting an opinion piece about her experience as a witness. "Share what you observed, what you learned, and what you think needs to change," the editor wrote. "Your perspective as someone who chose to document rather than look away is valuable." She sat down that evening to write, beginning with a simple observation: "I've traveled over 100,000 miles annually for the past decade. I've witnessed countless moments of discrimination in airports and on planes. What made Gate A12 different wasn't the incident itself, it was the presence of consequences. At medical technology companies across the country, executives studied the Bennett Protocol with new interest. Dr. Amara Bennett wasn't just a successful investor and innovator. She had demonstrated a new kind of corporate influence, one that built accountability mechanisms directly into investment agreements. "It's brilliant in its simplicity," one CEO remarked to her board. She created a system where discrimination carried immediate significant financial consequences. Now everyone's scrambling to implement similar protections, not necessarily because they've had moral awakenings, but because discrimination has become too expensive to tolerate. Officer Miguel Rodriguez attended his first day of comprehensive retraining, expecting a perfunctory presentation on diversity. Instead, he found himself in a rigorous program designed by experts in law enforcement ethics and bias recognition. "This isn't about checking boxes," the instructor explained. "This is about fundamentally transforming how security personnel interact with the public." Dr. Bennett's foundation designed this program based on data from thousands of documented incidents. Your completion isn't just about keeping your job, it's about being part of necessary change. Sophia Lopez received a promotion to Senior Training Coordinator with a specific mandate to redesign how flight attendants and gate agents were prepared to handle potential discrimination situations. The goal isn't just to avoid incidents like Gate A12, her new supervisor explained. It's to create a culture where speaking up against bias becomes as natural and expected as any other safety protocol. Amara Bennett herself maintained a deliberate public silence in the days following the incident, declining interview requests and media appearances. This wasn't about personal vindication or publicity. It was about allowing the systems she had created to work as designed, transforming a moment of personal humiliation into lasting structural change. In her Manhattan hotel suite, she reviewed the implementation reports for Phase 3 with Rachel and her team. "The passenger advocacy organization is fully funded and staffing up," Rachel reported. "The Scholarship Foundation for Minorities in Aviation Management has already received over 2,000 applications. And the Industry Accountability Rating System will launch next quarter with participation from consumer protection agencies in 12 countries. Amara nodded, satisfied but not triumphant. "This was never about punishing one airline or a few individuals," she said quietly. "It was about changing the calculations that allow discrimination to continue because addressing it seems more expensive than ignoring it." Rachel smiled slightly. "Well, those calculations have definitely changed. Every major airline CEO in the country is currently reviewing their investment agreements, terrified of finding Protocol 8-style provisions they didn't read carefully enough." "Good," Amara replied simply. "Fear can be a powerful motivator for change when other approaches fail." As evening fell on the third day after Gate A12, a simple press release went out from the Bennett Foundation. It contained no accusations, no dramatic statements, and no personal narratives. Instead, it announced the establishment of 3 new initiatives: the Dignity First Passenger Advocacy Organization, dedicated to documenting and addressing discrimination in transportation; the Bennett Aviation Leadership Scholarship, providing education funding for minorities pursuing careers in aviation management; the Transportation Equity Rating System, a consumer-focused accountability tool for evaluating how companies handle issues of discrimination and accessibility. The final paragraph simply stated, "What happened at Kennedy Airport on Tuesday wasn't an isolated incident. It was a manifestation of patterns that affect thousands of travelers daily. These initiatives aren't about punishment, but transformation, creating systems where dignity becomes non-negotiable rather than optional." The broader impact was becoming clear. What began as one woman being questioned about her boarding pass had evolved into a catalyst for industry-wide reassessment of how power, accountability, and consequences intersected in corporate America. 6 months after the events at Gate A12, Amara Bennett returned to Kennedy Airport for the first time since that transformative day. She walked through the terminal quietly, dressed simply in slacks and a sweater, observing the changes both visible and invisible. The most obvious physical change was at Gate A12 itself, which had been redesigned as part of Horizon Airlines' Dignity First initiative. The gate counter now featured a prominent display of passenger rights in multiple languages. Behind it hung a framed photograph of Amara's grandmother in her coral dress donated by Amara herself as a reminder of the legacy of standing firm in the face of discrimination. But the more significant changes weren't physical, they resided in processes, policies, and people. Sophia Lopez, now Horizon's Director of Inclusive Service Training, greeted Amara warmly. "Dr. Bennett, welcome back. Thank you for agreeing to speak to our leadership team today." Amara nodded. "I'm curious to see what's changed beyond the surface." "A great deal," Sophia assured her, "though we still have far to go." She led Amara through the terminal, highlighting changes both visible and structural. New digital verification systems had eliminated much of the subjective judgment from boarding processes. Gate agents now received real-time feedback from passengers through anonymous rating systems. Most importantly, the company had implemented a version of Protocol 8 across its entire operation, creating accountability mechanisms that didn't rely on the presence of a powerful investor to function. The most significant change, Sophia explained as they walked, is in how we respond when incidents do occur. We've moved from denial and defensiveness to acknowledgement and resolution. It's transformed our culture in ways I wouldn't have believed possible 6 months ago. Veronica Whitfield, the gate manager whose actions had triggered the Protocol 8 response, had indeed been terminated from Horizon Airlines. But her story hadn't ended there. After a period of reflection and mandatory anti-bias training as part of her severance agreement, she had found an unexpected role at a community accountability center, sharing her experience as a cautionary tale for corporate training programs. "I became the face of what not to do," she explained to a group of customer service trainees at a recent session. "But more importantly, I've had to examine why I made those assumptions and how deeply they were embedded in both my personal thinking and the corporate culture I worked in." Her story wasn't one of redemption so much as reconstruction, rebuilding a professional identity based on lessons learned through significant consequences. Officer Trevor Walsh hadn't fared as well. His explicitly biased comments, captured on multiple recordings, had made him unemployable in airport security. He had left the industry entirely his career, a casualty of his own prejudice, given voice at precisely the wrong moment. Officer Miguel Rodriguez, by contrast, had completed his retraining and emerged as an advocate for reform within airport security services. "What happened that day forced me to recognize my own complicity," he explained to new recruits. "Not because I said anything explicitly biased, but because I didn't speak up when I should have." Silence in the face of discrimination is its own form of participation. Elise Morgan, the trainee who had spoken up about Amara's valid boarding pass, had been promoted to a special role on Horizon's cultural transformation team. Her willingness to challenge authority, despite her junior status, had become a celebrated example of the airline's new values in action. As for William Blackwood, the former CEO whose leadership had allowed discriminatory patterns to persist, despite awareness of the issues, he had indeed been removed by the board within hours of the Gate A12 incident. After a brief period of unemployment, he had resurfaced at a smaller regional airline. His career diminished but not destroyed his perspective. Fundamentally altered by watching billions in investment vanish due to discrimination he had failed to address. The Bennett effect, as financial analysts now called it, had spread far beyond Horizon Airlines. Companies across industries had begun incorporating accountability mechanisms into their operations, not necessarily from moral conviction, but from practical recognition that discrimination had become too expensive to tolerate. The Transportation Equity Rating System, launched 3 months after Gate A12, now allowed travelers to compare airlines, bus companies, and train services based on their handling of discrimination incidents, accessibility provisions, and passenger advocacy measures. Consumer choices had begun shifting accordingly, creating market pressure for continued improvement. The Bennett Aviation Leadership Scholarship had already funded education for 250 minority students pursuing careers in aviation management, creating a pipeline for diverse leadership that would bear fruit in the coming years. And the Dignity First Passenger Advocacy Organization had documented over 5,000 incidents of discrimination in transportation, creating a database that companies could no longer dismiss as isolated incidents or misunderstandings. But perhaps the most profound change was invisible, residing in the calculations made in corporate boardrooms and training sessions across the country. Discrimination had acquired a price tag too significant to ignore. The questions being asked were no longer, can we manage this PR problem, but how do we transform our culture so this doesn't happen here? Amara arrived at the conference room where Horizon's leadership team awaited her remarks. The faces around the table belonged to a significantly more diverse group than would have been present 6 months earlier. Janet Reeves, the interim CEO who had become permanent, greeted Amara with genuine respect rather than corporate formality. Dr. Bennett, thank you for coming today. We're not here to pretend that 6 months of work has solved problems that were years in the making, but we would like to share what we've learned and the changes we're implementing. Amara nodded. I'm here to listen. For the next hour, the team presented data, not platitudes. They showed incident reduction metrics, passenger satisfaction improvements, and most importantly, transparent reporting of the discrimination cases that still occurred despite their efforts. We're not claiming perfection, Janet concluded. We're demonstrating commitment to continuous improvement through accountability and transparency. When they finished, Amara finally spoke. 6 months ago, I withdrew my investment from Horizon Airlines because it became clear that financial influence alone couldn't create the necessary transformation. I'm pleased to see that losing that investment may have accomplished what having it could not. There were nods around the table. Acknowledgement of the painful truth that sometimes change requires loss to catalyze action. The work you've begun is significant, Amara continued. But its real test will come when media attention fades, when public pressure eases, when doing the right thing becomes inconvenient rather than celebrated. True transformation isn't measured in months, but in years of consistent action aligned with stated values. After the meeting, Amara walked through the terminal toward her gate for a flight to Chicago. As she approached security, she noticed the officers' more respectful interactions with all passengers. At the boarding gate, she observed the deliberate care agents took to verify documentation without making assumptions. When she settled into her first-class seat, the flight attendant greeted her by name, not because she was recognized as the powerful investor who had transformed the airline, but because she was treating every passenger with the same level of attention and respect. As the plane taxied toward takeoff, Amara opened her tablet to review proposals for reinvesting the $4.9 billion withdrawn from Horizon. The Bennett Foundation team had identified several promising opportunities across industries where strategic investment coupled with accountability mechanisms could drive meaningful change. She paused, looking out the window at the sprawling airport below. Gate A12 was visible from this angle, a small point in a vast complex, yet the origin of ripples that continued to spread outward in widening circles of influence. The true power of Protocol 8 hadn't been in the technology that documented the discrimination or the financial leverage that created consequences. Its power had been in changing the fundamental equation that had allowed discrimination to persist, making the cost of maintaining bias higher than the cost of transforming culture. As the plane lifted into the sky, Amara thought about her grandmother in that coral dress, standing firm at lunch counters and voter registration drives decades earlier. She had taught Amara that dignity was never given. It was claimed, protected, and extended to others through action rather than words. In that spirit, what happened at Gate A12 hadn't just been about one woman refusing to be erased or one company facing consequences. It had been about creating systems where dignity became non-negotiable rather than optional, not through appeals to conscience, but through mechanisms that made discrimination too expensive to maintain. The plane banked gently, leaving Kennedy Airport behind. But the changes that had begun there 6 months earlier continued to unfold, not perfect or complete, but real and consequential, transforming how power, accountability, and dignity intersected in spaces where some had long been told they didn't belong. If this story of accountability and transformation resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that change is possible when we refuse to accept discrimination as normal. Drop a comment below about a time when you witnessed or experienced something similar. Your stories help others know they're not alone. Remember, the most powerful tool against injustice is our willingness to document it, share it, and demand consequences. Together, we can make dignity non-negotiable in every space.